Rope is a film that was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It came out in 1948 and the screenplay is by Arthur Lawrence. It's based on a stage play by Patrick Hamilton. The basic premise of the film is that these two men decide to commit the perfect murder. They want to try and commit a murder just to see if they can get away with it. So the film begins when we see them strangling this guy, and then they put him in this casket and then have party guests over. And the party guests are basically friends, family, loved ones of the man they've just killed. So very intriguing concept, a little bit sinister. It's one of those films that's done, and probably the first, I think, film that was shot as one long take. Hitchcock had this idea. He always wanted to film a play, a stage play, and this was the one that kind of grabbed him, and he wanted to do it as one long shot so that it had that stage play feel to it. With films like that, you can often lose the cinematic feel about them. Like this doesn't particularly feel cinematic in that respect. It feels like what it is, which is a stage play. But it's still pretty well handled by Hitchcock, you know, with his roving camera, constantly following these two guys around this apartment as they interact with these different people. It's really down to the performances and the writing. Now, as I said, the script is by a man called Arthur Lawrence, and he wasn't particularly favourable of this film. I've seen him in interviews, and the interviews I've seen, which were actually on the Blu-ray of this, he's very critical of it. Hitchcock and the studio did a lot of stuff with his script that he didn't particularly like. One of them being the fact that they show this murder at the beginning. He always thought that actually it would be much more gripping and tense if you didn't know whether or not they'd actually done it. Obviously they talk about it, we the audience get the feeling there's something going on, there's something in that casket, but not showing the body at the start would give us that feeling, that constant questioning of whether or not did they do it, have they killed their friend. I think I can kind of agree with that, but I don't think it hurts the film so much, because I still think the tension comes out of whether or not they're going to get caught. It's a different type of tension. The tension he's talking about is whether or not they did it, and I think the tension here, to some respects I think it's the right way to go, is are they going to get caught? Because the whole theme or thesis of the film really is whether or not Nietzschean ideas could really work. You know, Nietzsche had this idea, you know, he's the man who's famous for saying that God's dead, essentially, the idea of God is dead, and that mankind needs to become the Superman, the Übermensch, as he called it. You know, this idea that we need to get rid of any kind of social construct of morality. Once we realise that morality is just a social construct, and we make our own ideas about where to go and try not to fit into any of that, then we're truly free and we become something more, something greater in his mind, you know? And that is the thesis of this character played by James Stewart, who's a teacher. You know, he taught this stuff in class, and then these two men who were in his class decided to take that to its extreme, you know, to kill this man, to make up their own rules, and to do what they want and try and get away with it, to become something in their mind, something better, something more than the everyday man, which is really twisted, but that's what the film is all about. And it kind of dissects that notion by showing us that actually once you do take it there, once you do live by this Nietzschean ideal, if you want to call it that, society really just falls apart, and that's kind of encompassed brilliantly in James Stewart's performance towards the end of the film, when he finds this body, when he sees essentially the results of his own teaching. You know, these men, they got this stuff, they got these theories, these ideas from his teaching, and he's confronted with that at the end. And I think the way that Stewart reacts to that is absolutely brilliant. One of my few criticisms for this would be that when he does find that body at the end, he goes into this big kind of monologue, this tirade about, well, about how he was wrong and about how they've shown him his ideas were wrong. And for me personally, they didn't need it, because it is all over Stewart's face. Like I say, his performance is so good at the end of that film that you see it. You see it in him. You see that he knows he's responsible. Partly, he's partly responsible for this dead man now, because of what he's taught, and all these grand notions he had in his head come falling down. Again, writer Lawrence, he believed that James Stewart was miscast, and a lot of this comes down to the fact that for him, the film in its original writing, the way he originally wrote it, had this homosexual subtext. I'm not sure you could even call it a subtext so much as a text. He wanted this to be a film about these two men who obviously had a gay relationship, and that their teacher was part of that, had been part of that at some point. I don't think it adds anything, to be honest. I think it does add a new dynamic to it, but not one that is necessary, and particularly not when this film was made. I don't think it would have been that progressive, to be honest. In a time when there weren't particularly many gay characters on screen, and ones that weren't kind of shown in a particularly positive light. To have two gay men represented on screen in a realistic way, only to have them both be killers, at the time it was released, I don't think it would have been the most progressive move. So I'm fine with them leaving that out of there. I still think there's some subtext in there by the way it's performed and some of the dialogue, so if you want to read that in, you still can. But I get it. I get why Lawrence was disappointed, because that's what he'd written. But honestly, from my own personal perspective, I think Hitchcock and I think the producers went the right way with it. For this kind of film, where you see something that's all done as one shot, we look at something like Birdman now and we marvel at the achievement. Well, really it all began with this film. Some of the cuts are pretty bad, it must be said. They didn't have digital technology then or anything like that, so you can see where the joins are. They do a better job with some of them than others, but that's neither here nor there. You're talking 1948. I think to achieve what they achieved with this film is still pretty staggering. I give it a 4 out of 5. Highly recommend it. If you've never seen a Hitchcock film before and you want to get started, I'd say this is a good place to start. If you have seen this film, I want to know what you thought about it, so please leave your comments in the section below. Thank you for watching, and please do check out my letterbox. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, and I also have a Patreon account now, so please do check that out to see what perks you can get. But thank you for watching, and until next time, crack it.